God is stirring something in my spirit. And I wrestled with this message, and I wrestled, and even in this morning during Sunday school, and I had Michael Schmidt teach from my class this morning, and I kept just wrestling and stirring. And I know God is wanting to do something. He's longing to do something in our nation. He's wanting to do something, and he's wanting to use this church. I believe, beyond a shadow of doubt, that the last 2 years have taught us something, that God is cleansing his bride. That God is purifying his bride for his return. I don't know the hour, I don't know when, but I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that God is returning soon. I used to scoff at that as a kid. When I'd hear preachers say that, I used to say, oh my goodness, no, it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen. And I don't know if it's age, I don't know if it's because I have a deeper connection to the Lord today. I don't know why it is what it is. But I know that the Lord is calling his bride home. And I know that God is restoring his bride to where it needs to be. The title of the message is Longing for More. Pastor Greg is on vacation today, so he had a much needed time in Gatlinburg. Him and Dawn and their entire family were able to go. And so he asked me a couple weeks ago to get ready for this today. And I know that I much like Pastor Greg in regards when I want to speak with transparency. I want to speak with what God has just been speaking to me and stirring to me. We're facing right now a resistance of the enemy that is greater than I can ever imagine. But I'm here today to tell you that the Spirit of God is greater than the resistance we face today. That the Spirit of God that dwells inside of each of you who are called by his name, who walk in that anointing, who walk in that Spirit, is greater than anything the world can throw your way. In Mark chapter 4, beginning in verse 35, it says, on that day when evening had come, he said to them, this is Jesus speaking, let us go across to the other side. And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was, and other boats were with him. A great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they, being the disciples, woke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said to them, Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith? And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, Who then is this, that even the wind and sea obey him? God, I thank you for this word. And I ask that as I've been praying all week, God, I'm not eloquent of speech. I'm not someone who is smooth with words. I can't coerce or convince people to follow. And I'm glad I can't. I need your Spirit to move inside of me. I need your word to penetrate the hardest hearts and soften it. Lord, speak to every individual in this room today. Holy Spirit, I ask that you use this broken vessel to share your gospel and transform lives. In Jesus' name, amen. So several of you raised your hands a second ago that you're going through something. And many of us, if not all of us, have gone through some significant storms. I love the fact that Pastor Greg is beginning a ministry of healing for people who have gone through brokenness, who are going through loss. If we're honest, there are times and seasons, especially with holidays coming, that it's like old wounds resurface. Maybe we've lost a loved one in the last year or two, or maybe it's been a decade or so, and those wounds are still existing. And it seems like the holidays come and they remind us of the pain that we feel. But in this story, in this account here, we see that the disciples and Jesus are in a storm. And a lot of times we blame other things in our lives for the storm, but in this particular case, Jesus sent them out to the lake. Jesus being all-knowing, Jesus having control, Jesus knowing what was next, sent them out into the Sea of Galilee, into the lake, into a boat, knowing a storm was coming. See, it was Jesus, not the disciples, who had suggested crossing the lake. They were not out of his will. A lot of times we see our storms and maybe we judge others in the sense of when they're walking through something. And this is the Pharisaical way of looking at things. Well, maybe it's sin in their life, right? Maybe if they wouldn't stop making so many poor decisions and choices, they wouldn't be walking through the storm. But in fact, in this case, not in every case, but in this case, we see Jesus sent them out, and Jesus was with them, but Jesus sent them out, and they faced a storm of great magnitude. And maybe today that you are facing a storm of great magnitude. Maybe in your life, you feel like the waves are crashing over your boat. And you feel like you're crying out for help, saying, God, I need your help today. I need your strength today. I need your endurance today. See, Jesus, being all-knowing, knew a storm would come. He still sent the disciples out in the boat. I hope today that some of our theology a little bit is scratched a little bit. That not every storm that you go through is something that you did wrong or someone else did wrong. But sometimes Jesus wants us to go through a storm to help us lean on him even more, because when things are always good, we tend to reject him. When the economy's good, right? Let's look in the natural. When the economy's good, when things are going well, we tend to rely on our own sufficiency, right? Is it not God who supplies? But we tend to forget that, right? When the pay is good. When the jobs keep flowing and we have to reject work because we're so busy. When things are coming in and when the bank account is fuller than ever, that's the blessing of God. But oftentimes we get lazy and complacent in that. I'm here to tell you today that not every storm is something sent by hell. Sometimes storms are Jesus waking us up for us to lean on him. You see, what if your storms were sent to press you into longing for a deeper trust in Jesus? What if your storms that you're walking through were sent for you to rely on Jesus more now than ever before? We must learn to trust Jesus completely, even if our obedience to him leads us in the storms. You see, the disciples obeyed Jesus. They said, okay, Jesus, we're going to hop in this boat. The disciples had no clue a storm was coming. And in life, oftentimes we don't see the storms of life coming. We don't see them approaching. Now, sometimes the Holy Spirit does give us a warning of sorts and says you're going to face calamity. And I think if we're sensitive to the Spirit now, we can see things brewing on the horizon in our economy and other facets that are troubling. But here's the thing: is our hope based on the U.S. government? No, absolutely not. It doesn't matter who's in office. It doesn't matter if Trump gets reelected or DeSantis gets elected or Biden gets reelected. It doesn't matter. Those things do not matter in the grand scheme of things. We don't put our hope in them. We don't put our trust in them. We put our trust in Jesus Christ, no matter the storm. We must learn to trust Jesus completely. See, when the pressure builds, do you rebuke Jesus like the disciples did? Or do you submit to his lordship? This is where rubber meets the road in a lot of our lives. And I'm old enough and been in ministry long enough to see that a lot of times storms make people quit. A lot of times when we walk through calamity, we see so often people surrender their faith to the things of the world, and they blame God, and they rebuke God. We all have questions, and theologically, we all have questions about why God allows good things to happen to bad people and bad things to happen to good people. We recently we're going through a series in our youth department called Faith in the Doubting, and now so more than ever, this generation has more questions and more doubts about Christianity than ever before. And I'm not scared of those things. I'm not scared of those questions. I'm not scared of those things. And neither is Jesus. Neither is Jesus. But I'm here to tell you that even in the circumstances you're in, that Jesus is in the boat with you. So the first step point today is depth brings pressure. The deeper we go in Jesus, the more pressure the world throws at us. Got a slide, a picture on the screen, and this is Morrison Springs, Florida. During COVID, the summer, I got a brother-in-law and sister that live in the Panhandle of Florida, and there wasn't much vacation options in the summer of 2020. You were kind of limited on where you can go. So we went to visit them in Florida, and they took us about an hour from their house, and you can see there's a dark spot near the center, and that is a cave, underwater cave that's a spring feeds that area, and the water is beautiful. I mean, it is crystal clear, and so the spring is 200 foot in diameter that produces 48 million gallons of pure water each day. It keeps a steady temperature of 65 degrees year-round, and its caverns go down to depths of 300 feet. So while we were out there, I still think sometimes I'm 22 years old, and I can just challenge, the laws of physics, and I think I'm stronger than what I think I am, and none of those things are true. And so my brother-in-law, his name is Tim. We decided that we were going to go out to the cavern right there, that dark spot, and we were going to free dive down. Now, that's about a 30-foot down. Where that goes down is about 30 foot deep. And so we decided that he's in the military, he's in the Air Force, so he's got a lot more training about these things than I ever could imagine. And so he made it down. But about 15, 16 foot down, the pressure in my ears started getting so bad. I was like, I can't do this. See, the deeper I went down, the more the pressure hurt me. And as I was preparing and I was thinking about this, a lot of times we want to go deeper in God, but we don't realize when we go deeper, there's a pressure that the world places on us, and a pressure for us to compromise and just to be just comfortable enough in our faith that we don't look fringy. We don't look unauthentic. And I'm here to tell you today that if you truly long for Jesus, he calls us out into the deep. He calls us to go deeper in him, and that's going to require us to face pressure from the world because the world hates him. The world hates what we stand for. The world doesn't understand why we don't compromise our values and our beliefs. But the world, because of the pressure, oftentimes we capitulate to them, and we just hang out at the surface. Many of you who've gone swimming before know, like if you drop something at the deep end of a pool, it's like 8 foot deep oftentimes, maybe 10 foot if you get a little deeper pool, and you dive in and you get to that 8 to 10 foot mark and your ears that pressure begins to build. And my brother-in-law, because I was asking him, he's been diving before, I asked him, how did you go that deep? He said, you have to release the pressure inside your ears as you go down. It's not something that, like, everyone hits the pressure. Everyone faces the same amount of pressure when they go deep. You have to release that pressure in order to enable you to go down to the depths that you want to go. In Acts 27 through 44, it says, about midnight on the 14th night of the storm, as we were driven across the Sea of Adria, the sailors sensed land was near. This is about Paul here. They dropped a weighted line and found that the water was 120 foot deep. But a little later, they measured again and found it was only 90 foot deep. At this rate, they were afraid we would soon be driven against the rocks along the shore. So they threw out 4 anchors from the back of the ship and prayed for daylight. Then the sailors tried to abandon the ship. They lowered the lifeboat as though they were going to put out anchors from the front of the ship. But Paul said to the commanding officer and the soldiers, you will all die unless the sailors stay aboard. So the sailors cut the ropes to the lifeboat and let it drift away. Just as day was dawning, Paul urged everyone to eat. You've been so worried that you haven't touched food for 2 weeks, he said. Please eat something now for your own good, for not a hair of your heads will perish. Then he took some bread and gave thanks to God before them all and broke off a piece and ate it. Then everyone was encouraged and began to eat. All 276 of us who were on board. After eating, the crew lightened the ship further by throwing the cargo of wheat overboard. When morning dawned, they didn't recognize the coastline, but they saw a bay with the beach and wondered if they can get to the shore by running the ship aground. So they cut off the anchors and left them in the sea. Then they lowered the rudders, raised the foresail, and headed toward shore. But they hit a shoal and ran the ship aground too soon. And the bow of the ship stuck fast, while the stern was repeatedly smashed by the force of the waves and began to break it apart. The soldiers wanted to kill the prisoners to make sure they didn't swim ashore and escape. But the commanding officer wanted to spare Paul, so he didn't let them carry out their plan. Then he ordered all who could swim to jump overboard first and make for land. The others held on to planks or debris from the broken ship, so everyone escaped safely to shore. So in context of the scripture, if you study the beginning part of chapter 27, you see Paul is a prisoner. Paul is a prisoner, and he's appealed to Caesar to hear he was arrested and appealed to Caesar. So he was on his way to Rome. And the time of year they were leaving, Paul warned them beforehand, hey, I've done 3 of these journeys before, and this time of year, if you leave, it could be disaster. There's a lot of bad storms that come in this time of year. And they did not heed his advice, and they went out, and it was clear sailing for a little bit. Everything looked good. Everything was fine. And then they hit a storm. Now, the difference in this storm was not just some kind of quick storm. This storm lasted for weeks. And for some of us in here, we are going through storms. Maybe you're going through years of storms. Maybe you're battling cancer or battled cancer, and it was years of treatment, months of treatment. And you're walking through a storm, or you know someone who's walking through just disaster after disaster in their life. And we see that in the previous story, that Jesus immediately spoke and things went calm. But what happens if the calm doesn't come immediately? See, in our longing for more and going deeper in God, our faith is going to be tested even more and more. Your faith is going to be tested more and more. See, Jesus can calm your storm, but but it doesn't always do it on our schedule. He doesn't always calm the storm on our schedule. You see, Paul had greater faith in the disciples. If you study a deeper study of Mark chapter 4 and then Acts 27, it was obvious that Paul had greater faith in the disciples. Paul was a man of deep faith at this point. The disciples were just beginning to follow Jesus. Their faith was kind of shallow. They even questioned who Jesus was. They rebuked Jesus at this point in their lives. See, Paul had greater faith than the disciples did at the times of the storms. But God didn't stop Paul's storm. See, the length or severity of your storms has little to do with your faith. It has little to do with how much faith you got. Paul had more faith in them. But as we grow deeper, we can expect greater storms. We can expect greater storms. See, there are some teachings out there that are really bad theologically. They believe that if you go through bad storms, it means you don't have the faith. It means something's wrong with your faith. That, well, if you truly believed, it's like a name it and claim it philosophy. If you truly believe and you truly have faith, then you'll be able to speak and get out of that storm in your life. If you truly believe and you truly have depths, you would see the storm coming. That's not how it works. Time and time again, we see that Christian believers walk through storms. And sometimes the storms are severe. And sometimes they're overwhelming. And sometimes we feel like we have to throw everything else overboard in order just to survive. And at times, that might be necessary. But I'm here to tell you today that Jesus is in the boat with you. If you are longing for more of him, you're going to face things in life that are going to hurt. The pressure is going to be great. But Jesus is with you. Jesus is with you every step of the way. I can't promise you that your storm is going to be short. And I'm not going to say that your storm is going to be long, but I'm here to tell you that Jesus is going to be with you through every storm that you walk through. You see, storms demonstrate the depth of our trust in God. Storms demonstrate the depth of our trust in God. See, the deeper our longing for God, the more he sustains us in the storms. When we go deeper, the more he sustains us. See, Paul had favor. In studying in Acts 27, Paul won favor of the captain of the ship. It didn't go in great detail how he won that favor, but he won favor. And through the storms, the soldiers wanted to kill off all the prisoners to lighten the load. That's pretty hardcore. Let's just kill everyone, throw them overboard so we can survive. They were viewed as trash and scum. But Paul had won favor. So the first point today is that depth brings pressure. The second point is that pressure brings refinement. On the screen, you see the process of how a coal becomes a diamond. And it's in just research, it says diamonds begin to form at about 725,000 pounds per square inch of pressure and temperatures between 2,000 and 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit. You see this ugly piece of coal on the left of carbon becomes something that of great value, but it requires pressure. It requires high temperature. It requires weathering a storm. And a lot of times we want Jesus just to make us happy. We want Jesus to make our lives comfortable. But we see the value doesn't come from being comfortable or happy. The value comes through pressure. The value comes through overcoming the pressure, overcoming what the world and the storms throw at us. In James chapter 1, and I love my favorite book of the Bible, James chapter 1, beginning in verse 2, says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that this testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." 1 John chapter 2, verse 15 through 17 says, "Do not love this world nor the things it offers. For when you love the world, you do not have the love of the Father in you. For the world only offers a craving for physical pleasure, a craving for everything we see, and pride in our achievements and possessions. These are not from the Father, but are from this world. And this world is fading away, along with everything that people crave. But anyone who does what pleases the Lord will live forever." See, the world's desires are like a pressure cooker, breaking us down until we submit to its will. I'm not a cook, I'm not anything like that, but we have an Instapot at home, and Heather loves to use the Instapot. She makes bone broth 2 or 3 times a week. I go to Sam's Club and I'll pick up a rotisserie chicken because that's some really, really good chicken. And so she'll break it down. I'll make sandwiches out of it, whatever. We'll eat it and munch on it. I like it when it comes straight from, I'll get in a truck and I'll just start picking pieces off the chicken. I'm addicted to that chicken. I don't know what they put on it. I don't know if it's good or not, but I'm eating it. It's good. It's delicious. Get home, and after we get all the meat off, Heather will take the carcass of the chicken, and she will put it into the Instapot, and she'll add some water and some carrots and some celery and some other vegetables, and she will make a very delicious bone broth out of the carcass. So something that is yucky and something that's pretty much valueless, right, is taken, and the pressure creates something good out of it. But the world wants you to cave to its pressure and devalue what Christ has done in you. The world wants to take what Jesus wants to do in your life and where Jesus wants to lead you and devalue you and make sure that you're worthless. I'm here to tell you today that when we go deeper, there's more pressure. But just like in the diamond we saw earlier, in the coal, that pressure that we feel, if we pass the test, if we do what we're called to do, and we trust Jesus through it, we are refined. And we become something better than what we were before. And that's the challenge, though, because a lot of times we are so short-sighted in our faith that when we face a hiccup or a challenge, we question a lot, right? I'm guilty when things get tough. I'm here to tell you that Jesus is not afraid of your questions. He's not. But if we're not careful, our questions can lead to significant doubts. And those doubts can lead us to rebellion and who God has made us to be. See, Satan doesn't fear a church that's complacent, that caves under pressure. I was sharing with our small group we had Wednesday night, senior high guys, and I played basketball and baseball and track in high school, and I remember at times in basketball there'd be higher pressure situations, free throws coming down, and I am not the guy that you want to make a free throw in a clutch moment. I fold like a wet noodle. Like it is not something like I will brick a free throw. I will airball it. I'm one of those guys. But there are some people who are just clutch, right? Under pressure, they got nerves of steel. They can make it through anything. And you know, I think about it in my faith though. I'm glad that my faith is not a reflection of my natural ability. I'm glad that my faith, when it's tested, that I don't fold like a wet napkin. I'm thankful to God that He has given me the strength. But a lot of it comes to spiritually, and I'm not better than anyone else in this room, but I've learned that the pressure is not a bad thing. That when I go deeper, I feel the pressure. And it's taken time to go deeper and deeper. It's not something that I just immediately, as a newborn Christian, dove into the deep end of a pool and I was hanging out in the depths and I was fine. No, it took sanctification. It took a process. It took time to get to the depths that Jesus wanted for me to go. And when the storms come and I'm grounded and rooted in Him, I can withstand it. See, God doesn't put pressure on us to perform. I love that about Jesus. We don't have to perform for Him. We don't have to perform. You do not have to perform for Jesus. Our faith isn't determined by works, abilities, or strengths. Our longing for more of God gives us the endurance we need to sustain the pressure. We need endurance in our church today. Enduring the pressure, which is trials and temptations, brings greater righteousness, which pleases God. Let me repeat that. Enduring the pressure brings greater righteousness, which pleases God. See, depth brings pressure. Pressure brings refinement. And number 3 is refinement brings life and peace of mind. On this next slide, it's the same trip that we took to Morrison Springs, but this is Ponce de Leon Springs, which is about 30 minutes away from that. And you look at little Harrison on the right, little Harrison. And that's my nephew, Andrew, who's a maniac, bless him. Good kid. You can look at a picture and tell he's a little goofy. But you see here in this picture where the water's clear on the left and murky and brown on the right. And this is where the spring water meets Sandy Creek. Ponce de Leon Springs merges with Sandy Creek at that point. And the water on the left is a cool 62 degrees. The water on the right is about 80 degrees. And so that place in between, you can literally feel as you get closer to the brown water, the temperature change. And that temperature change where Harrison is, it's pretty comfortable. Where my nephew is, it's pretty chilly. Psalm 46, 1-3. And I want you to keep a mental image of that picture. God is our refuge and strength, always ready to help in times of trouble. So we will not fear when earthquakes come and the mountains crumble into the sea. Let the oceans roar and foam. Let the mountains tremble as the waters surge. You see, walking in refinement means abandoning the lukewarm comforts. So we see, if you go back to that picture for me, where Harrison is, it's pretty comfortable. But it's not a clear source of water, is it? It's murky. It's called Sandy Creek. Should be called Rusty Creek. It's kind of gross. A lot of brown water sources down in Florida and South Alabama. A lot of the creeks look like that on the right. On the left, you can see how clear it is. Even with the ripples, how clear that and pure that water is. Now, it's cold. It is definitely bone-chilling cold. In other pictures that I had, I thought about sharing, but I didn't. The Ponce de Leon Springs is not as deep, but the water is actually a little bit colder for whatever reason than at Morrison Springs. But we have to understand that a lot of times are like Harrison in this picture. We want to get close enough to the purity and refinement, but we want to enjoy the comforts of the world. And that's not what God has called us to do. We want to feel good in the natural. We want to be Christians, right? We want to be like Christ, but we want our toes dipped into some of the values of the world offers us. See, so many Christians want to see the refinement, but stay in the comforts of their lives. They're close enough to witness it in others, but are timid to take that step to enter God's plans. We can see it in other people's lives. We see it. We're close enough. You see, the flesh desires a comfortable atmosphere, but the spirit longs for the deep mysteries of God. Our flesh, which we wrestle with, right? We wrestle with our flesh every day. Temptation. We wrestle with those things. We wrestle with the value. We listen to what the world says about our value instead of what Jesus says. We wrestle with these things. We wrestle with them every day. We wake up every day. I wake up every day, and it's a choice to listen to what the world says about me or to listen to what the Spirit says about me. And I know in my spirit I'm longing for something more. I can't pinpoint, I can't put a finger on it, I can't figure it out, and I'm praying and I'm asking God, what is it, God? I want more. And I say that, and I'm reminded that requires going in deeper water. That requires going in deeper depths. That requires more pressure. James 1:12 says, "Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial. For when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him." See, far too often when in the storm, we forget that the one who brings peace is with us. We focus on the storm and lose sight of the one who will see us through it. But be assured that the strong Son of God will go with you into the depths, the pressure, and refinement. Today I'm here to remind you that the storm you're walking in and walking through, no matter if it's been a long-term storm or something that's just popped up, that the storm is not your enemy. The storm is not your enemy, because Jesus is with you in the storm. And Jesus is going to give you the strength if you allow him to sustain. And I don't know about you, and I can always speak from me this morning, but I want more of Jesus. I want to go deeper with him in his Spirit. But I know that means something that I have to do differently. That means I can't be who I was, and I can't be comfortable in what he's called me to do. I can't just accept the status quo. I can't be like that picture where I'm enjoying the layout of the land and I'm seeing how pure and how beautiful it is over there, but I'm complacent in my 80-degree water because it feels better. And I'm here to challenge you this morning, church family. If we're not careful, we'll be a church that looks comfortable to the world. We want to accept everyone and welcome everyone here, but we can't look anything like the world and be like Jesus. This morning, I'm going to close out in prayer, and I want to offer an opportunity. It's still early. If you're walking through a storm today, you say, I need strength. I feel like quitting. There might be several in here who've gone through those things. Maybe you feel like quitting a marriage because it's hard. And maybe through no fault of your own. Maybe you're walking through a job transition. And financially, you're strapped. You're walking through a storm. Maybe it's an illness. And you're asking God, why, God? This has been going on for months. Why? This morning, I want to pray for you. That the God who walks with us through the storms will sustain you. That he will heal you. And he will give you a fresh vision of why you've walked through or you're walking through what you're walking through. I can't give you the answers to every why. I don't know why some storms last longer. I don't know why it seems like for some the pressure is greater. But I want to challenge you today and encourage you and remind you that storm you're walking in, Jesus is in that boat with you. And the one who maybe allowed us to go through the storms can rebuke the storm. But we have to cry out to him. God, I thank you. I thank you for your word. Lord, I've been obedient in proclaiming the word that I felt that you've given me. And God, the response today has nothing to do with me. Whether 100 people respond or none. God, I believe today that you are speaking to hearts and lives. That you're reminding us to go deeper with you. No matter what the storms offer or bring our way, that we'll go deeper. No matter how great the pressure gets because of the depth, we won't quit. We won't quit because we know that pressure brings refinement to our lives and brings peace that we're searching for. This morning, if you're searching for peace, you're longing for more of Jesus in your life. You're longing for the mysteries to be revealed of the truth of who he is. You're wanting to get out of the comforts of the lukewarm, and you see the purity, you see the goodness, you see, and you're close. Just like that picture of the two creeks merging, it's just a couple steps. It's just a couple steps. So if you're in this room this morning and you're saying, I long for more of Jesus in my life. I long for a deeper relationship with him. I want the peace to help me get through the storms. I want you to join me up here. There's no pressure on anybody or anyone. I'm not going to coerce or beg, but I want you to join me here. I want to pray for you this morning. I want to pray over your life. I want to pray the peace of God into you. I want to pray for that boldness to step out in your workplace and wherever God is leading you to go deeper, that you will do it. So if that's you this morning, just for a few minutes, I want to encourage you to take that step out. Come join me up here at this point. come join me.